Hi, it's Janine again. The meeting is now live streaming. We're ready whenever you are.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Chair, I do see everyone in attendance, just as an
Okay.
FYI.
Okay, I would like to call to order the Finance and Budgeting Committee meeting for Thursday, February the 4th. And the clerk will please call the roll.
Calling the roll, Mr. Miller,
Here.
Mr. Tuma,
Here.
Mr. Jones,
Here.
Mr. Gallagher,
Here.
Mr. Schran, Mr. Schran, I did see him here. Ms. Brown? Here. Ms. Baker?
Here.
We have a quorum. And
Okay, thank you very much. And yes, Councilman Schran is in attendance. I'm looking right
Here.
at him.
I must have had, it froze for a second there.
Okay.
You're probably calling the roll.
So let the record show that Councilman Schran is here. The next item on the agenda is public comment. Do we have any public comment?
no, Mr. Chair, we did not receive public comment.
Thank you very much. And the next item is approval of the minutes from the February 1st meeting. Do we have a motion relative to those minutes?
Man Baker.
Is there a second?
Second, Brown.
It's been moved by Councilwoman Baker, seconded by Councilwoman Brown to approve the minutes for February 1st, 2021. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The minutes are approved. And the next item on the agenda is a discussion. We just have one item on the agenda today, which is the presentation from our ERP consultant, Zig Berzens. Welcome to the committee and please proceed.
Thank you, sir. And I'm going to now share my screen. And does everybody see the presentation?
Not yet?
Not yet. It says, there it is.
Okay.
Okay.
Got it now.
All right. Okay. So this is the January 31 report, and the briefing is, of course, dated today. I'll talk a little bit about looking back on the history of the project, and I want to try to keep this project in perspective. I want to talk a little bit about the messages that we get from the project status trends. The latest weekly report, which is for 1/29, talk some more about the critical path of completing the payroll portion of the project. A suggestion on our part that you should be getting evidence of progress. And then the big concern that the project team has, which is not surprising, resources are continuing to be pulled from the project, which of course tends to slow the project down. We'll talk a little bit about dollars and some conclusions. So in terms of looking back, just some project history for you. Basically there have been surprises over the last four or 5 years, and they've all been related to data scope and and a few product surprises. There have, as you know, been significant leadership changes. There's been significant project staff turnover. And of course, whenever you've got that kind of turnover, the project team loses a lot of organizational knowledge of the product as well as the business processes of the county. And all of the above basically have resulted in what I refer to as project scope creep. Things have moved and crept forward, and often there's been some frequent rescheduling. There was a major descoping, which was a change in the Infor contract, reducing some of the deliverables that they were that were originally in the contract. And of course, there have been some project cost increases over the years. This is a chart that I have used and tried to keep the whole project in front of you so that everybody can see what all the various components are, because it is large, it is complex, and there are quite a few components. The green check marks are in essence the modules that have been launched. So they're in production and they're being used. The boxes that have the components with the orange question mark are the ones that remain as part of phase one, which is what will be going on for this coming year. The red X's are the pieces that have been formally deferred. These were part of the Infor contract descoping, which was pulled out of the contract, so that Infor is not responsible for delivering those, and that includes expense management, upper middle of the screen, compensation management, total rewards, then down by the purple enterprise asset management. Portions of that have been deferred, so the green check mark refers to work orders. Talent management, the only piece of talent management that's been put in to the left there, you see talent acquisition, that's in, but the rest of talent management's been deferred. Originally they were trying to pull the Harris property management, new property management system into the system. That system got pushed out, so that's basically deferred. Budget formulation got moved off as well. Part 3 is still hanging out there. CRM in the lower left-hand corner of the purple box, it was put in on a pilot basis for HHS, but it's not going to be expanded out to the rest of the county. And then we wanted to also show you that the rollout to the non-executive agencies, which is the big orange arrow on the right, that's spreading out into the rest of phase one. Also, I want to mention that the business intelligence reporting called BURST has been deferred. That's the red X down there. And same with the historical data repository, which is called Data Lake. So those have been pushed forward. But that's just to kind of keep everything in perspective. Functionally, I think we just need to recognize that the one major key success overall has been the implementation of work order processing for public works. It's been in place for about 2 years and is continuing on. I think we have talked before that the reason it has been so successful is that in essence, the team automated something that wasn't automated before. So that's working quite well. The general ledger was launched early in 2020, but we had some problems closing on a monthly basis, and that finally caught up, and the closings I think now are being conducted monthly as they should be, and that is good news. Procurement and accounts payable, which is referred to as the supply chain, launched at the end of Q1, and it continues to have some process hiccups. And mind you, I say process hiccups as opposed to product hiccups, meaning that there are continuing to be minor issues with regard to the way that people are submitting data and how they're submitting it, and so that becomes a training issue. Contracts management was launched at the end of Q3, and at the time, at the end of January, there were 100 contracts, which is about 20% of everything that was being handled, that were having some issues with regard to processing. That has, I noticed in the latest reports, has dropped off significantly, which is good news. Open enrollment, which is part of GHR, launched 3 years ago. It's been used three times. Unfortunately, there's been some hand-holding that Infor has had to provide and/or other contractors because the HR staffing or staff ended up with some turnover, so they had some shortfalls, and so that's why they needed the help. Hopefully that in the coming year, that will not be necessary. The project was restructured early a year ago, and broken into 2 phases, phase 1, phase 2, and that was the descoping of the Infor contract. So the items that were in phase 2 at the time, which I showed you on that graphic earlier, basically are sitting out there waiting for a detailed plan and funding, and it still needs to be resolved as to who's going to end up providing the support work, whether or not it's going to be other contractors or whether or not it's going to be Infor themselves. So that is still to be determined. However, in the late last year, the team restructured the project again. So all of a sudden, instead of 2 phases, we ended up with 4. And what was in phase 2, which is theoretically supposed to immediately follow phase 1, and that included expense management and the rest of talent management, that's been now moved into a phase 3. I'll show you that a little bit later. So to keep the project in perspective, we need to recognize that the project team is working on finishing up phase 1, which is payroll, WFM, and budget formulation part 3, as well as the post-go live activities. So that's going on right now. But they're also having to contend with keeping what's been launched working. So they've literally been spending some time on the production side as well as the implementation side. That the high turnover that we've talked about has created a need to conduct refresher training. So that's added more time, more resource needs, and stretches the responsiveness of the team to get the system working smoothly. The team, I think, tends to look at all of its activities as being pertinent, including production as well as the project team, and so that tends to be combined. And when that happens, I mean, then the focus of people looking at what's going on in the project gets confused a little bit as to what they should be paying attention to, what's really part of the production environment, and what's part of the implementation environment, and who is responsible for what. And of course, in some cases, it's the same individual responsible for both, which causes some difficulties in their resource allocation. So here was the switch that was made on 11/30, November the 30th. We got this story in the finance committee briefing, and we had these 4 sequential phases. Phase 1 is what everybody's been working on. Phase 2 became, instead of finishing, it became stabilize and leverage. So the whole idea of let's get everything working better and let's focus on that. And therefore, the team pushed the remainder of the project, which again includes expense management and talent management, pushed that to 2022. That was phase 3. And then finally, when you start thinking that, oh yeah, we need to go to the latest version of Infor, that's probably going to occur in 2023. starting with, of course, a fairly major evaluation process to even decide whether or not you want to do it. The 4 phases look a little different. You know, we got another update in January of the 4 phases, and now all of a sudden, you know, the payroll has been deferred to 2022, and you can see that we have an overlap now of that stabilization phase. So some of that stabilization work is going on while we try to finish phase 1. And it stretches all the way out to 2022, which overlaps with now the balance of the system, which is phase 3. And that's stretching from 2022 into 2023. And now you can see that phase 4 is looking at the 2023-2024 timeframe. Okay. This is the status or the position of phase 1 as shown by the team, and you know, which is, well, I just wanted to make sure that everybody would recognize that it's not perfect. It's in the modules are in, of course, but you know, the ones that I've listed with an X in there are the ones that I'm suggesting are not fully stabilized. They require extensive follow-up. And there's a lot of training that needs to go on and retraining that needs to go on. There's only minor configuration changes. So this is all about, do people know and understand how to do what they need to do? And so it's process related. The ones with the check marks are the modules that have actually been launched and have been in place for quite a while now. And the reason I think it's important to recognize that is that they are now starting to experience normal updates and changes in response to day-to-day business process changes. And that's to be expected. It goes on, but we've got to recognize, and people need to recognize, that this is really part of production. It's not part of the product and finishing the implementation of ERP. Okay. I do think we need to refocus our monitoring. You know, we have spent a lot of time over the last couple of years looking at that overall percent complete over on the left-hand side. And, you know, it was meaningful early on. But things have changed considerably. A good portion of the modules have been implemented, and there's been a tremendous amount of increase in the number of tasks as the payroll WFM piece continues to be rescheduled and replanned. So I'm suggesting it's meaningless for to look at that 87% complete. It just because it used to be 93. I mean, so it's really not telling us much. What we do need to pay attention to is the percent complete of payroll and WFM. And so that's why I've got the arrow there. And I do think it's important that we focus in on that, and that should be where we should track things and pay attention to that tracking carefully every time we see it. You know, I'll talk about this some more, but you know, it needs to be looked at weekly because there's a history now of multiple reschedules and multiple replanning of that payroll thing. And it's time to really tie that down as carefully as we can. So I'm referring to the bundle 4, which is the payroll WFM piece. It also includes budget or labor forecasting. Labor forecasting part 3. I have always said that the project needs to maintain pace. And clearly the project has not maintained pace. I mean, you've had multiple reschedules, but now is the time that we've got to really tighten down on that. And now there's focus only on payroll and WFM, which simplifies all this. It doesn't have as many things in play. Okay, so we need to be looking at weekly progress reporting, and it needs to be against that project plan. I mean, that plan has been updated multiple times. Hopefully, this is now the last time that that plan gets updated in any significant manner in terms of adding tasks. I mean, we ought to know how many tasks we have now that we have less to look at. So if you look at this thing now and the team is saying there's a baseline of it's 74% complete for bundle 4 as of the beginning of 2021. That means that there's 27% of progress points that need to be completed by the end of the year. There's 12 months, okay? And if you just simply look at this thing and do the calculation, and if you assume that the work is relatively even, and I know that it won't be, but the point is we've got to start somewhere, and therefore the pace should be 0.5 points every week. And if the team maintains 0.5 points of progress every week, they will be maintaining pace. They will get to the end. But if they miss a week, you can't sit there and say that the following week you get 0.5. That doesn't catch you up. You're behind immediately. So in order to maintain pace, if you're not getting 0.5 points in a given week, then the following week you should get a full point. And that should help in terms of maintaining pace. So I urge management to pay attention and to look at this thing and to expect the team to be able to submit that kind of update on a weekly basis. This is a chart that the project team has presented several times to the finance committee. And what they have tried to show here is what's working. In other words, what portions of payroll and WFM are working. And it's good news that they've said that there's a lot of it working. But the team also was very clearly stating that there are some pieces that are quote unquote with red X's. Those are not working. And so that's the passing of badge data from Galaxy to WFM, the payroll reports, ACH processing and or passing of ACH payments to the banks. Those need to be working in order for parallels to be meaningful. So I don't know if not working means that there's still development work to be done, or is there just some testing work to be done? Don't know that. But clearly it needs to be done before you start with the parallels. So that should be something that the management should be asking as we get closer and closer to starting the parallels. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in the coming pages. So let's talk about the messengers of the payroll status trends. As you know, we've been tracking those status trends. But I think we also need to recognize that the reports stopped including the master plan information after the week of 11/6/20. So it's been almost 3 months of not having that in the weekly reports. What's happened is the team has fallen into a pattern of posting these weekly reports in batches. 3 weeks of worth of reports, 4 weeks worth of reports, 6 weeks worth of reports. So they're constantly in a catch-up mode, but they're also constantly looking back and identifying and documenting things that should be documented on a weekly basis. Now, to my knowledge, Infor has been providing the weekly reports on a weekly basis. I think where things fell down is when it got from Infor to project management. If you delay the publication of your weekly reports, in essence, the team is negating the county's opportunity for monitoring project pace. And when you do, it is a best practice in project management It has been used by the team. It continues to be used and should be used in the future. But there needs to be some discipline to do that on a weekly basis. And there's no reason why that can't be done. The trends, are right now show some good news. I mean, it's unfortunate we didn't have those reports weekly as they should have been, but the payroll WFM project has been rescheduled, replanned, and you can see that at the end of this period, I'm showing it here from November to current. The reports have been published. They are current. We've got the latest one from 129. And of course, everything should be green, and it is green because it's been most recently replanned. Now the question is, if the team maintains pace, and if the discipline is there, then this project can and should continue to have green arrows from now until January. There's no reason that it shouldn't.
Okay, well, thank you for that positive report. And on that note, I'm just going to mention that Councilwoman Conwell has joined the meeting, and we'll ask you to continue.
Okay. The other thing, so those green arrows, those are coming straight from whatever color they are, straight from the weekly reports. The weekly reports also include, have included, and now are including again, the master project plan, which shows the percent complete. And you can see that the last time we had one was November the 6th in the weekly report. And they now have shown up again in the latest report, as they should. And you can see that what the team has done is that the team allocated all of the previous payroll activities prior to October, and they allocated all of those to a separate section, and those are 100% complete. So what they're talking about now is what's left. Payroll / WFM remaining, you see, is 41% complete in November and has moved to 51% complete at the end of January. So there's forward motion and forward movement. That is a good thing. Time clock implementation was in the beginning segregated out, and I found it buried in there because it's been moved in and it's summarized into payroll, but it's in there, and so it's showing some positive movement forward and getting close to completion. And then you can see that in November, budgeting part 3 was listed as 0% complete, which I interpret as being no work has been done. And then some work has been done on getting that going in January. So it looks like that's going to start moving forward. Needless to say, I'm hopeful that as we go forward, we don't see any more not applicables or not availables. So there is an impact to not having timely reporting on these weekly reports. County management can't hold the project team accountable for maintaining the pace if you don't have timely reports. And if that's the case, then you allow the project pace to consistently drag and lead to multiple major delays. That's been the history. I mean, it has been the history. Whether you like it or not, that's the case. Also, county management can't really mitigate weekly slippage on a timely basis. The whole idea of reporting weekly and to talk about results and activities weekly is that if you are slipping, that you take action, that you mitigate and do something about it, and you do it in the following week. That's how you maintain pace. If you don't, you end up kicking the can down the road.
So Zig,
Yes.
a question. If the next report would be the weekly report for February 5th, which is tomorrow. And if things are operating on schedule and we're getting weekly reports on time, when should we receive that report for February 5th?
What is a very reasonable time target would be by Tuesday of the week of the following week. I know that the Infor team provides their reporting typically over the weekend, sometimes Monday. And then it's a matter of consolidating, reviewing, and publishing. Should happen by Tuesday. That gives you,
Okay.
because if that happens, that means you can do something the rest of the week and have an impact on, if you discover something and you see something, then you have time to take action. And that, in my mind, there's no reason why that can't happen.
Okay, well, we're going to look for that report on Tuesday and monitor it.
Okay.
If I may ask, Chair, as long as we're on that topic,
Yes, Ms. Baker.
thanks. So we've been told, because of course we've asked, why are these reports coming so late? And, you know, when more funding is needed because of, as example, payroll is now delayed, it was explained that the reports are time consuming, and it's just not on top of the list to get done, and that they're going to make a better effort because we're asking for them, but it's really not a tool that they take seriously, is the answer back to us. I mean, anybody can disagree with me if they think I'm wrong, but that was kind of the answer why, oh, it's just a bureaucratic, time-consuming effort that we delay because we're so busy trying to make sure we stay on task for things we know need to be addressed. Now, is there any sense to that excuse?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, I am, Zig. I'm asking you because we already heard it.
There's no question that the reports have become burdensome in the sense that there's a lot of information in there. But there tends to be a lot of repetitive cut and paste kind of information.
Mhm.
And there's also, an awful lot of, there appears to me that there's a lot of information rolling up to the top, and there's maybe not enough delegation of getting the various components of it put together so that it becomes nothing more than a consolidating activity. We spend a lot of, I've had conversations with project management, about simplifying, the reporting, but I can't make anybody do that. But there are ways I think that they could simplify that report and turn it more into a 4 or 5 page thing instead of a 15 to 20 page thing.
Right. And,
Okay.
if I may follow on that, I don't really understand why, if Infor has the responsibility to create a report weekly, why do we have to manipulate it at all? Why do we have to look at that and then put our changes or differences? Why can't we just see Infor's report?
Well, you've got several things going on here. In what the process today is that Infor prepares a weekly report.
Right.
Infor then provides that report to county project management.
Okay.
County project management then adds and adjusts the report. And then county project management returns the report to Infor and asks Infor to publish the report. The report is supposed to be for the project. It's supposed to be for the implementation of the ERP solution. Where things start getting confusing is that Infor is contracted to provide services outside of the ERP project implementation. They are contracted to provide support for some of the activities that are already in production. But they are still contracted to do that, and they are reporting against those are some of those change orders that you've seen that are actually for operations. I mean, so they are not part of the implementation project, but they still have to provide the weekly report on their contracted activities. So things start getting a little confusing. What I have suggested to them, to project management, is that you really ought to segregate this thing. In other words, you really ought to say, this is about the project, this is about production.
Mhm.
And that is the production stuff is stuff that, should be going to operations, should be going to the administration, should be going to DOIT. I'm not sure that the council should be overly concerned about production activities until somebody says we got to change the operating budget. But certainly you have interest and concern for the ERP project because that's the appropriation and that's where you've got interest in the money, the $35 million or 38 or whatever it is.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, then the Infor report, without any interpretation or addition or expansion upon it by the project management, that would not be a sufficient report for us to review?
That's correct. Here's the other reason why that's the case. Infor is contracted to provide a deliverable, which is at the back end of finishing the payroll WFM portion of the project. That won't happen until the fourth quarter of 2021. From a contract perspective, the way it's originally written, they don't have anything to do for the next 6 months. I mean, there really isn't. But that's what the project management told you Monday, is that they are renegotiating the contract with Infor so that they can keep their people on site and have them involved during all the parallels of payroll. But see, if they're not involved, the only thing that they can do in terms of reporting weekly is to talk about their services.
I see.
So if they renegotiate the contract and then they say, fine, we'll help you during those parallels, you can just picture what's going to be in the report. The report's going to say, we provided you with 42 hours or 22 hours of support, and we corrected the following things based on these errors that occurred in this parallel.
Yeah.
That's all they're going to say. They're not going to say anything about the rest of the project because they're not doing it.
I understand.
The county is.
That
Okay, so
clarifies.
so the county is responsible now for the project plan and for updating the plan because Infor doesn't have anything to do. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I mean, I'm just wondering, do you think it's unrealistic for the project management team to put a report out every week when is there a bureaucracy piece that is redundant for them or not a good way to spend their time? I mean, is there anything at all to that argument that they have made?
I don't think it's a burden at all
Okay.
to put together a weekly status report for your project if you're a project manager.
Okay.
That's one of the things that you do. That's something that has to be in place. It's part of documenting the project. If someone thinks that it's burdensome, it's because they're not really allocating their time reasonably well. They're not delegating. there's a long list of all these things. And certainly if you're trying to bury people in a 25-page document on a weekly basis, I mean, who looks at it? I do. I'm not sure anybody else does.
Right.
But that's, it needs to be much more succinct, much more straightforward. I mean, and that can be done.
All right.
And especially if you use the project plan. I mean, the project plan has all the tasks.
Right.
You need to really just focus in on exactly, I mean, there's your document. It says right there what you're supposed to be doing this week.
Right.
Yeah, to me, that's pretty easy, pretty straightforward.
Is front and center, and that 74 complete increases every week. So of all the things I've heard, that sounds like where we don't want to get lost in the report and not recognize that that is really what we need to be looking at, and would ask our project management team to give us that at the top of every report, how we're doing progressing on payroll and workforce management. Just my suggestion.
So I'd like to make a couple comments on that. First of all, about producing reports, it's not like that they have to write a whole new report every week from scratch. They have a template of defined elements that they update on a weekly basis, and so that's a lot less of a task than if you had to start new every week and write a whole new report. As far as workforce management and payroll, I agree that is our top focus. And in addition to monitoring the percentage complete, I would note that in the presentation that we got on Monday, they provided a more detailed schedule than what we've seen before as to exactly everything that has to happen and when it's supposed to happen, even down to the very date that they're going to give the go, no go decision on the go live for this operation. And so our second focus, besides the 0.5% per week, should be to monitor progress against each of these benchmarks and to watch closely as to whether things are happening when they're supposed to happen. For example, whether the first parallel begins on that date, I believe April 11th or so, when that's supposed to happen. So this is the other aspect that we should be watching closely.
Shall I continue?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I did take a look at the latest weekly report. Just as I continue to talk to project management about the fact that I don't understand why a major milestone would not be the labor budgeting. And so this particular chart is at the beginning of every weekly report. And you can see that the last line in there is payroll and WFM go live, but we don't list the labor budgeting piece. I don't understand that. If you're going to talk about major milestones, I mean, it seems to me it should be there. We need to recognize that its date is going to be beyond January the 22nd, 2022, beyond the target date of January of 2022. So it'll be in February or March. It's when that'll finish. I was taken aback by the fact that the fourth parallel that's described in the plan is listed as optional. My only question is, if you're going to have an optional activity, you would think that the team would tell you why it's optional. Okay, and the other thing that we don't see or we don't know is if something is optional, there's this possibility that you're not going to do it. If you're not going to do it, what's the impact on the schedule? Is there any? I would think that the team should talk to you about that, because if you look at this optional, look at line item 3042, you see the start and stop dates, and you see that the elapsed time is 41.5 days. Those are work days. That's 2 months. I don't know, does that mean that if you don't do a fourth parallel, that you could actually bring this thing in 2 months early? Interesting question.
I think, if I may, Chair, I think before we lose that screen, I think the answer that, because we asked that question also, was that they don't think they're going to need a fourth parallel payroll. They think that that's just there in case they should have issues where they're going to need it. But I think it was explained that they think 3 payroll parallels will be enough. And I could be wrong on that, but that's what I remember the explanation being.
But the point, I guess my point is that if you don't do it, then that gives you 2 months.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the impression that I got is that they had a specific amount of time that they wanted to spend on this parallel testing, and that they would like to do 4 parallels, and they've said the more that they can do, the better. And so if there's time enough, they're going to do the 4 parallels, and they even suggested that if things went really well, that they could conceivably do a 5th parallel. So I don't think it's a matter of cutting it off and being ready 2 months earlier. I think they're gonna, the intention that I heard is to do as many parallels as they can fit in the time frame roughly between March through sometime in the summer that they're devoting to these parallels. And that they're saying there has to be a minimum of 3 and 4 if possible.
I believe you're right, Councilman Miller. I believe, I do remember that conversation that way.
My concern will be is that the more parallels you do, the more times you are asking those people who are selected to be included in the parallel, the more times you're asking them to do double duty. You got to think about that, because the team has told me that they are not going to change people. In other words, the people that are selected for the first parallel are the same people that will be selected for the 4th, 5th, or 6th parallel. I'm not sure that makes sense,
Okay.
but that's
How many parallels would you recommend, Zig?
I cannot.
What a number.
Well, the part of the problem is the way you're setting up the parallel. If you're using the same people, I have a concern that if you're using the same people, you're going to get the same mistakes. Okay, in my mind, you shouldn't be using the same people for the parallels to begin with. And you also shouldn't be selecting people. You should be, in a directed manner, you should be selecting them randomly. I mean, if you select people in a directed fashion, then I think you have trouble assuring the county that the results is applicable to the population.
Well, the purpose of a parallel is to catch oopses that you might not know until you go live. And so you run a parallel path to make sure. And so how many do you recommend? Give us a
3
number.
is plenty.
Okay, there you go. That's all I was looking for, was what your number is as far as your expectation. If you find there's an error in parallel 1 that needs to be fixed, do you then change 3 to something higher?
Well, again, I think you should be, you certainly you fix whatever you find.
Of course
but
you do.
but you need to change who's participating in the parallel so that you have different, potentially different errors, not the same error. Because people tend to do things the same way.
Well, I'd like to hope they learn by the errors.
But you know,
That's the purpose of running them.
where the purpose of the parallel is to make corrections to the software. It becomes, you know, hopefully you're not going to have any process changes or training changes.
Oh,
That should not be the case, we would hope.
well, I don't think that's realistic. I mean, you're going to run these things in a parallel test. You're going to find that you're going to have some processes that need to be
True.
tweaked.
True,
Yes.
true.
I mean, when you say you don't hope you're going to find it, actually, I hope you do find some, because that's the corrective action before you go live. I mean,
You bet.
That's the whole purpose of it.
But that's why I think in one, it should be randomly selected, and two, it should be different people every parallel.
I don't have any problem with either one of those, but I would really hope you are going to learn something. I'd rather learn it now and before the go
You bet.
live than you would
You bet.
after you go live.
Oh, absolutely. But three should be plenty.
I'm
If
frozen,
you,
I think.
if you change
Or you
the
are,
people,
one of the two.
if you do them randomly. Okay. Shall I go on?
Yes,
In the 129 report, there was another harbinger for potential delay. There's a section in that report that's repeated every week, and it's called high-level risks. The concern that I have is that these risks have been exactly the same and have been repeated. They're obviously cut and pasted for the past 3 months of those weekly reports. So these are high-level risks, yet you don't see any kind of action that says we're going to do something about these risks. So that makes the presumption that the risks continue to be there. And if they continue to be there, then all you're doing is justifying or rationalizing for future delays. I mean, if there's a risk, somebody ought to sit there and say, well, let's do something about it. Now, if you don't do anything about it, you need to basically formally say, I accept that risk. And once you accept that risk, for Pete's sakes, you can't sit back and say, well, that's going to be a good reason for me to rationalize some kind of a change in the future. Make sense? Okay, let's, as the chair was talking, about, you got these parallels coming up. So there's some critical things to think about. So this is kind of the way I see the remainder of the project when things are going on. But there's a significant number of prerequisites that have to be finished. They have to be ready in order for you to run the parallels. And if you don't get those done, then this whole thing starts shifting. Okay, it starts shifting. So what are we talking about? So in my mind, it's important that we start seeing evidence of progress. Not only should we be looking at those percent completes, but we need to start seeing evidence of progress. Okay, and I'm looking at these from a perspective of interim milestones, not the milestones that we talked about earlier, that at the top of the weekly chart to say, oh, gee, we got a milestone that says we're going to finish payroll in January of 2022. There's some interim activities, which means that the focus needs to be on those prerequisites. Okay. And the way we need to make sure that happens is that we need to say, well, then we have to sort of pretend we're in Missouri, the show me state. We got to say, show me some evidence that you've completed some of these things, and tell me that the list exists, the inventory exists, that a diagram has been made, a flow chart's been made, so forth. Okay, so the very first one, and these are coming straight out of the detailed project plan, okay? Thursday, February the 25th, that's a targeted date for the following tasks. Payroll officer list is created and confirmed. Okay, so show me the list. WFM time entry supervisors list created and confirmed. Great, show me the list. and so on. But those specific activities have to be completed before you can do your parallel. They're appropriate and properly put in the plan. People need to pay attention. There's a date. There's an interim milestone. And then that's how you're going to maintain, also how you're going to maintain pace. There's also a series of activities that are targeted to finish on 2/26/21. I mean, what is that, 3 weeks away? And you can, basically, these are all interfaces. They're supposed to be finished, ready. Okay. There's also a set of dates, targeted activities are supposed to be finished on Friday, March the 5th. So complete all communications to the people who have been selected for the parallel. It doesn't mean you don't want to have somebody on the team to tell you they're working on it. No, complete. That means that they work on it the week before, and they're able to say, the following people have been notified. This is the email that was sent out to them, or whatever. Complete comparing the 13 standard Infor payroll reports to the legacy payroll system. I mean, it's a task in the work plan. Well, I'd want to see, here's a list of the 13, and I want a check mark that says, I compared it, I compared it, I compared it, I compared it. Complete the validation of the 6 custom payroll reports. Okay, so supposedly there are 6 reports, they're custom developed. They need to be validated. So there needs to be a list that says, here's the 6 reports, here's the name of the report, and there's a date that says Billy or Susie or Bobby validated it. I'm hung up on this whole business of who's going to be selected for the payroll, for the parallels. I mean, there's definitely a difference of opinion about that. All I'm suggesting is that if you don't use sampling, solid statistical sampling techniques, which includes randomly selecting, then what you have to do is you have to then describe to management what assurances you can provide that the results are applicable to all 8,000 employees. And that's missing. That's not there. Clearly defined assurances of the applicability of the parallel results to the entire population. That needs to be in place. The team is struggling with the fact that their resources are getting pulled. And I think we know about that. I just am just trying to highlight that for everybody, recognizing that we've got a lot of things that are in production right now. People are trying to do multiple jobs, and it's causing a lot of bandwidth issues, specifically with the technical staff. But it's also happening, with payroll staff and with HR staff. So some of the things that are going on, and some of these things are potentially going to go away soon. But the point is that we may find ourselves with something else happening. But the annual close, of course, is pulling people away. Payroll, of course, is getting pulled away because of year-end activities. We still have people that are needing support on and explanations on how to submit requisitions, on how to properly submit a contract. It's getting better, but it's still happening. Okay. The contracts thing, I just, I like to graph things. And so this is the history of daily reports regarding the contracts. After they started doing it in December. And the last one that I've got here is 128, which you can see the total number of contracts that are in play is climbing. that's good. I mean, that's okay. That means it's getting in the system. The line that's concerning is number 4 down here, which had it's the gray line. And those are the failures. Those are the contracts that are requiring a lot of rework. Okay. And amendments as well. So, excuse me. Green is dropping down. You saw green drop down to it's almost to 0. So actual failures is on a good trend. But amendments did a jump up. That's the gray line, number 4. And amendments on contracts seems to be causing some problems in terms of requiring rework, and process is not adequate. And so they're trying to work that out. But you can see that there's project people now focusing on contracts and contracts was launched in September. I mean, so you can see that that's an example. I'm sorry, I hit a button too fast there. So let's talk a little bit about dollars. And I just wanted to show you, this is the team's fiscal position. And all I wanted to say about that is that, and this is a timing thing. You know, it's good that they report this, and I'm not going to argue about what their numbers are, but I think it would be nice if the numbers are more current. Okay, so these are 12/31. These are 12/31 numbers, and so it shows you the estimate of what it's going to require to finish, based on actuals plus the estimate to finish, and that's as of 12/31. Yet here we are in February. I mean, so it would be nice if they had 1/31 numbers included. Now, this is basically describing the restructuring approach to the Infor contract, which I talked about earlier. You know, and this is a good thing. I mean, I think it's reasonable and appropriate that they try to hang on to the 4 Infor consultants between now and the end of the year. That makes an awful lot of sense, and I think Infor, you know, appears to be, I think, willing to do that. I mean, what that does, of course, is it changes the payment schedule so that you don't wait until the end of the year. What I would suggest, I mean, as they are looking at this renegotiation, is to still do a holdback at the end of the year. So, I mean, rather than, you know, just turning it into basically a time and materials relationship, is to, you know, certainly pay a little bit every month, but still keep enough holdback that you know, you're assured that Infor will stick around for their final deliverables at the end of the year. This is disturbing. This is in the weekly report. On the left-hand side is what's in the weekly report, and Infor basically lists their receivables. I kind of added the aging over here on the right-hand side. So, and you can see that there's a billing for $77,000 that's 9 months old. I don't understand that. And you know, and you've got 3. Well, one of them's a credit, but there's 2 billings in there for 24 and 26 that are 4 to 6 months old. Up until 2 weeks ago, I was very nervous when I discovered that, you see that $1.5 million in there? That's the annual license fee. And that's supposed to be paid in December. And up until 2 weeks ago, that had not been paid. And that is for the current year. That's you pay in advance. So, but my understanding is that has been paid. So with a wire. So that with that being paid, I mean, that still leaves a balance right there with the arrow of $451,697, of which 132 is current, but everything else is pretty old. I think the county ought to pay. I'm repeating myself here when I talk about my view regarding statistical sampling. You know, if you don't use statistical sampling appropriately, I don't think you can assure the county that the variations in pay conditions are going to be appropriately tested for. all 8,000 employees. We've talked about this in the past several times. I wanted to kind of remind everybody that, you've got some portions of this project or portions of this system that have been in play, been in production for 3 years. And it seems to me like it's time to conduct a post-implementation audit on the ones that are in. It does not make sense in my mind to wait until next year, 2022, or even as far as 2023, to be looking at the work order implementation that went in 2018. I mean, that's 4 or 5 years. So I do believe, and this is a kind of a restatement of what a post-implementation audit accomplishes. And then I would literally, institute those audits right now in 2021 for EAM work orders and GHR, open enrollment, and I would do those in 2021. General ledger I would do in 2022, and then supply chain, which is purchasing and AP and contracts, in 2022 as well. Obviously payroll after you put payroll in. But I do think it's time to be thinking about that. And these things, typically, are going to run you $50,000 to $100,000 each one.
So do you have an opinion as to who should perform these audits?
Well, the preference would be to build your internal audit capabilities, without a doubt. I mean, because I think that establishes, the positioning of your internal audit department, and so forth. If you don't have the resources internally, then of course you need to contract it out. But there are plenty of firms that do this kind of thing, and you don't have to get the big boys, and pay a horrendous rate per hour. You can certainly use smaller accounting firms that have IT audit staff. But I put the range in there. Certainly, general ledger would be at the lower end. It's because it's not as complex. EAM also. Supply chain would be at the higher end without a doubt.
How disruptive is that, Zig, to the team?
I don't think it's, it would be very disruptive at all. Again, because EAM has been in production for 3 years.
Right.
And that would not be disruptive. And also most of the work is analysis of data, as opposed, and yes, there's some interviews, without a doubt, but the other portion of it that usually involves analysis of emails, and that's a matter of you. So it would be requiring some help from the IT department to capture all the emails that historically. So no, I don't think it's going to be that bad. I mean, of course, will there be some? Sure. But it shouldn't be, especially if you spread it out. I mean, the amount of time or the duration of doing something like this in 2021, might run from March to September. So it's not like it's concentrated. It's not like you're taking up people's time constantly. And in this case, since you're focusing from a project perspective, since you're focusing on payroll and WFM, that means that you're from public works shouldn't be affected whatsoever. And GHR, you're talking about a production environment, day-to-day working kinds of things. Same thing with general ledger. Supply chain, if you do it in 2022, that's making 2021 your stabilization year. So you finally get everything solved and relaxed, and everybody knows what they're doing on using procurement and AP and contracts.
This has been discussed, so it's good to see that you're reinforcing perhaps additional conversation to consider this. So thank you.
Okay, well, good. Spending, you know, I've always felt that, unfortunately, work expands to meet the time available, and therefore organizations tend to spend the funds that are available. It's unfortunate that, in November, we had all kinds of conversations about $400,000 were left in the appropriation, and that would be enough and we could finish. Well, clearly that has not happened. That the $400,000 has been absorbed and used in terms of budgeted spend. The team has come back and asked for more. So I think that, the thing that needs to happen going forward, especially because we now have almost X percent, let's say, that's in production. You've got GHR, general ledger, supply chain, you've got all these components that are in production. They are the responsibility of the IT department to keep them running appropriately and make appropriate changes and so forth, and to use the Infor service licensing, maintenance and support contract, the 1.5 million, to use that as they're supposed to maintain and support what's actually running. So the thing that needs to be clear as you go forward over the next year is what is being spent for production and what is being spent for the project. And I know that there's been some attempts at that, and I know that some of that's been going on, but you just got to I think you got to keep asking the questions and making sure that you're just looking at dollars associated with the implementation and finishing the project, which should be dollars now, should be dollars focused strictly on payroll, WFM, and BFM. I mean, there's absolutely nothing else left in phase one that's part of that appropriation that you're responsible for, which is the $35+ million. Anything else beyond that, it becomes operational, and that should be things that the administration should be concerned with. And I think it would help. It will help if Infor can also segregate what it's doing and how it's reporting and talking to the county, because there's a relatively long list of change orders that are all production related. And then there's just the balance of the contract, which is what I think project management talked to you about, the $1.1 million. I mean, that's what's left on the phase one contract with Infor. That's for payroll, WFM, and BFM. That's it. That doesn't cover anything else. And I think everybody needs to just continue to keep that segregated, so that you don't let things slip through and all of a sudden find yourself paying for some production stuff that you really shouldn't be. And of course, it jacks the overall budget up as well. We're so close now that you shouldn't be seeing any more changes. So, getting the end result. The team has re-strategized and restructured ERP into multiple phases. They've inserted stabilization, phase 2. So no new ERP components will be implemented during phase 2. Only by the end of 2023, 7 years after you started, will the county achieve the full functionality that you purchased at that time. That's the bottom line. On that note, I am done.
So thank you very much for that presentation. And I have have one broad level question for you. When looking at payroll and workforce management, and the budget piece, which goes along with it, it does look that they now have a schedule that's not so tightly packed that that it doesn't have any give and play in it, and that it should be doable. And they also have the advantage that they're not trying to go live on 10 different modules all at once. And my question is, between these two advantages, do you think we've finally arrived at a point where we should be able to meet the schedule that we have in front of us?
I think the team has plenty of time. The key is to make sure that they don't fall in the trap of letting some things slip early on. And I think that which just requires some discipline, and it requires, I think, management, holding their feet to the fire. And there's going to be a natural tendency of the team to think in terms of, we have plenty of time. And so it's always easy for everybody to say, we'll do that next week. We'll do that next week. We'll follow up on that next week. And that's going to get them into trouble. It has in the past. It will again. But will they still get to the end result? Probably. What will probably happen is, if they allow themselves to quote unquote kick the can down the road and let some things slide early, what they'll end up doing is they'll end up saying, well, we'll just cut out a couple of parallels. That's what they'll end up doing. Okay. I mean, like I say, they'll still probably get to the end result, but they may end up cutting the scope of work by simply not doing some of the parallels.
Okay, thanks. Are there other questions by my colleagues?
I have a question, Chair.
Ms. Baker?
So earlier in the presentation, and we've gotten through the importance of following payroll and workforce management, you mentioned that there was cutting and pasting for 3 months on high-level risks. What are the high-level risks that you're speaking of, and does that have anything to do with payroll and workforce management?
Yes, but it's not specific. The risks are along the lines of, gee, we've got to train people. Gee, we've got turnover of staff. It's that those kinds of risks. And again, the team has, and I think this came out Monday even, the team has known that it had a high level risk of turnover in HR for a year. Just like they've known that they've had a high level turnover in finance for almost a year as well, right?
Okay.
So those are the kinds of risks. But the point is if you know that that's a risk, what are you going to do about it? A year ago we should have been saying, well, we need to replace and figure out or get new people or whatever the action is going to be. Does that make sense? Yes,
it does. And you're right, that those are repeated concerns that we keep hearing. And I wasn't sure that's what you were referring to.
That's it.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, my colleagues?
Hey, Dale.
Okay. Yes.
Yes, Dale, based on Zig, based on your date, do you think that this is a done deal? As far as that it is going to work, the schedule is going to work, everything's laid out, all the steps are in place. At least if I understand what you just said.
Yes, sir.
Okay, with all those steps in place, and you are very, very high confidence level, do we need you anymore? That wasn't a joke. That was a financial question.
No, I understand that. And, you know, I mean, if I were in your shoes and you know, and I felt that everything was in great shape, you know, you don't need me to continue to say this.
Everything is not in great shape. I'm just based on what you just gave us as your professional opinion. You think that all the stars are finally aligned to get a much smaller scope project done based on, I saw an awful lot of green on your schedule.
I would say to you, and again, being as straightforward as possible is I think I'm the one person that seems to be hammering on the discipline necessary to keep up the pace. And if somebody else is going to do that, then no, you don't need me.
Well, Mr. Gallagher asked a question a couple days ago to Jack, and he was unequivocal in saying that he would place his job on the success of hitting that green schedule right now. I have no doubt that Mr. Gallagher will keep him at his word on that point.
If I
So
may,
that's a
that's the second time.
anyway. That's
Yeah, that's the second time that adjustments have been made. And also, I think that I have a comfort level knowing that Zig is there. I'm not sure we should put our foot off the gas. We've just now gotten a report that we've been behind on since November. I think Zig is right. I think he is the internal watchdog that keeps them on task. More so than we can be. We just aren't that close to it, to be internally watching everything that he just outlined for us today. For the few more months that we're talking about, maybe by June or July, we might have a better feel for it and think we can run it out now to the end of the year. But at this point, I am not comfortable in having Zig go anywhere. He's the eyes and ears for us. And so far, we've needed it. I would not.
It's a year from now.
Well,
Yeah, you're talking another year of
I'm
this
talking at
contract, man.
least 6 years.
Another year.
Well, I'm talking at least 6 months. I mean, I don't know if we have to take it out a year, but we could have 6 months with the option to renew for 6. I don't know. But
So I'll just, yeah.
Okay.
I raised the question.
Okay, well, I think it's a question worth raising and starting to think about, and I feel that we're in a better position than we've been, but I don't have the confidence level yet to say that Zig's work is done. For one thing, I would like to start seeing weekly reports come in every week on time, and so that we are able to effectively monitor progress. If that were to start to happen, well, then our position would take another positive step. So, but for now, we're going to carry on, and I appreciate the report, and we'll check in one more time. Does anybody else have any comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Jack, your word is only as good as your last lie. So I take Jack's word with a grain of salt.
I hope you don't mean this, Jack.
Pardon me?
You don't mean this, Jack, I hope.
No. No. And there,
Thank you.
I think
I want to
Jack,
separate the two.
I don't recall you ever lying to me.
Jack with 2 Ks.
Yeah, or at least publicly on the record to my face. But I will suggest, as far as a comfort level, if this were our homes, our personal homes, and our personal money being put into our personal homes, and this was going on, we would have fired everybody. And we continue on, and I have been very vocal about not supporting this project with any more money, and I will continue to do so. And I've been very vocal that as we go forward, this has now become council's problem. So do we continue with building the home badly, or do we just pull the plug and start all over? Because I'm telling you now, and I haven't been wrong not one single time, they're not going to make their time. They're going to need more money. And when in the end, we're going to get probably less than a third of what we were promised. So all of my committee friends, if this is your home, do you put more money into that plumber that didn't put your toilet in for a year? I'm sick of going out to the woods. How about you? Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Okay, does anybody have any miscellaneous?
The only thing on Mr. Gall,
Yes,
yes. The only comment on the plumber analogy is that the plumbers, the folks down on the ground level who are actually fixing the toilet is where the problem is. And we have no ability to fire that person on this project.
And I'm not talking about a union plumber.
okay,
I'm talking about the CEO who's running the plumbing.
I do think, Chair and Jack and Mike, that we should really hold the ground on these reports, and that we were asked for additional funds and held back on what was asked because those reports were late. And I don't think we should give any dollars or funding for any additional wants or changes or unexpected high-level risks that come along that require more dollars if those reports aren't in place. So I'm not anticipating there's going to be more money asked for, but I'm just saying that if there is, those reports better be timely. And I think that's our hammer in this process, along with what Zig reinforces on this project.
and I would like to add as the chair that I endorse what Councilwoman Baker has said, that we're gonna raise our level of insistence regarding the weekly reports. I think it's a very important aspect of the monitoring process, and I actually think that now that we're down to a smaller number of elements, I think we actually have greater capability to use those reports effectively to monitor the remaining aspects that have to be done. And so yes, we're going to insist on those reports, and it's important.
Dale,
Yes.
having opened up the conversation about the reports, one of the last presentations we had in our focused update from Jack was the change of billing techniques. Zig, are you up to speed on that? That they are going to take the same deliverables, the same dollars, but spread it over a different period of time? And if so, if you're aware of that, do you have any concerns about the same dollars being spread over a longer period of time and the deliverables coming from Infor coming at that different sequencing time?
I'm aware.
If you're not,
I'm aware conceptually of what they are negotiating and what they're talking about. But I do have a concern that I don't know if they've left a lump sum at the back end, which I think they should do. Just so they can, you keep Infor around, that sort of thing. But I do think it's important that they keep the key Infor consultants in play, because Infor is in a position to basically walk away for the next 6 months. Because they don't have contractually, they don't have any deliverables due for the next 6 months. So I think it's very reasonable what they're trying to do. I don't know what the change order looks like. I don't know what the details are. But I'm pretty sure that they have not included a lump sum, which I certainly would recommend that they do, whatever that number might be.
Nan or Dale, I did not pick up that there was a lump sum. I did pick up that they were spreading out deliverables that they believe are still left outstanding, and they were spreading out the fees to go through, to run it through almost to the end of this period, to keep
Jack,
in order.
Jack, excuse me, they're not spreading deliverables. They're not spreading the deliverables, because the deliverables are very specific to payroll and WFM, and they are simply, they're just sitting at the back end. So they're not really, when I say not spreading deliverables, they're not moving those deliverables to someplace early in the project. Those still reside in the fourth quarter of 2021. And that's, getting the production ready for payroll and that kind of stuff. I mean, that's the deliverables that they've got sitting out there. What they're trying to do is basically to say, okay, and I don't know how they're wording it, but they want to say, we'll take some of that $1.1 million and repurpose it to pay for the time of 4 consultants from now until the fourth quarter.
Yeah. This is Jack Ryan, if I could, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
On this subject, it is true that we're going to spread the payment across. They're proposing to spread the payment across fairly evenly across the remaining months in the contract. It is also true that Infor can walk away at any point and come back to do deliverables at the end of the contract. From a contractual standpoint, the deliverables are still the deliverables, and the deliverables are primarily around those things required. The remaining deliverables are around those things required for go live. So go live cutover and post go live support, all those kinds of things. There will be in the change order that's going to be put in front of Board of Control. We will have the deliverables identified and the payment schedule clearly identified. And there's also wording in that change order, we've already got it drafted, that makes it clear that Infor is not relieved from their contractual responsibility on the deliverables. So those things have been addressed.
Zig, if you're not up to speed, Mr. Chairman, I would encourage him to dig into that so that we can have our eyes and ears just to make sure we completely understand what this alternative, because we're going to be, I assume, ultimately asked to vote on extending this out to my colleague, Mr. Gallagher. We're being told it's not any more money. We're only being told it's the way that the peanut butter gets spread.
Yeah, there is no increase that is a true statement, just to emphasize that point, sir. There's not an increase in the price of the remaining deliverables just because we're changing the schedule. It only changes the payment schedule portion of the contract.
Well, it's not necessarily what it shows at the bottom line. It's the internal words that show whether or not there has a contingency that they could kick in a fee charge or anything of that nature that I would like Zig to look on our behalf out there.
And we're also having law look at this as well. They reviewed it. And I asked that same question to make sure I wasn't missing anything contractually. So we're certainly in agreement that the wording needs to make sure that it accounts for that.
But Jack, would you send me a copy of that so I can take a look at it?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Any miscellaneous business? Hearing none. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay. Thank you, Zig. Thank you very much, my colleagues and everybody else. And this meeting is adjourned.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody. Stay safe.
Thanks. Nick.
Zig, that was nothing negative to you. It was my fiscal responsibilities to our taxpayers.
It's okay, sir.